Hey guys, so the 2024 presidential election is officially underway. We have three candidates now on the Republican side, one officially on the Democratic side, with Joe Biden being expected to run. And so despite challenges from Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, Pompeo, or even Tim Scott, Donald Trump remains the frontrunner for the GOP. And of course, if Joe Biden does announce a re-election bid, he will almost be guaranteed to win re-nomination, no matter how unpopular he is on the Democratic side. A lot of Democrats don't want Biden to run again, mainly because of his age, but if he does run, he is going to win the nomination. The Democratic Party is not going to remove their sitting president. And so in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election map based on the latest polls. So during the 2022 midterms, a ton of polls were done in the 35 Senate races. We had polls asking who people will vote for in those Senate elections, as well as the governor and presidential elections, with the presidential race in 2024 being one of the most asked about races. So, and a lot of those questions were asked about a potential matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Yes, the same candidates that we had in 2020. And so at this point in time, Joe Biden and Donald Trump remain the people to beat in their respective parties' primary races, and so that's why we're going to go with these two candidates. With less than 2 years to go, it still looks like Donald Trump has a very good chance at clinching the Republican nomination for a third time in a row. So we're going to start off with the southwestern region here, move up to the Midwest and the Northeast, and finish off with Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. So when looking at this map, it really is going to show you just how competitive the next election is going to be. And the first example of this is Nevada, a state that Joe Biden won by 2.4% in 2020, but a state in which he is now underwater, and Donald Trump leads on average by 3.8% in the silver state. And of course, Joe Biden was also able to carry Arizona, another state that he is now behind it. And I'm going to go over both of these states together. In Arizona, Donald Trump leads by a margin of 2.4%. Joe Biden, however, does lead in a few polls here, but mainly Donald Trump is the person to beat here. So looking at both of these states, there were states that Joe Biden won narrowly in 2020, but it does show that he is having trouble winning those voters again in a 2024 scenario. Nevada has been a state that's voted for Democrats since 2008. The last Republican to win it was George W. Bush in 2004, while Arizona was a red state for a very long time until Joe Biden flipped it just 2 years ago, because in 1996, when Bill Clinton won re-election, that was the last time a Democrat ever won Arizona before Biden did in 2020. So both of these states are going to be crucial, I would say more so for Democrats, if Joe Biden wants to win re-election. It would be a really bad sign if Joe Biden can't even win Nevada, a state that even Hillary Clinton won in 2016. Now, moving on to the state of Texas, we have some pretty expected numbers here. Donald Trump leads on average by 6%, but honestly not as good as you would think. Trump did win Texas by 5.6% in 2020, but really he is doing surprisingly poorly here, as we will probably see Ted Cruz defeat whoever his Democratic challenger is in 2024 by a larger margin than that. And so when looking at these poll aggregates, I did not include any partisan polls. All of these are nonpartisan. I've removed all the polls sponsored by Democratic or Republican super PACs, as well as Republican and Democratic leaning organizations. So these are the most unbiased polls we have, and these are the numbers that we're seeing from an average of the numbers we've gotten over the last 2 years. So in Texas, Trump, not surprisingly, has led in every single poll. We do have one with DeSantis that I forgot to remove, but it shouldn't really change the average too much. It should raise the average a little bit, so Trump may be plus 6.4%, but really what we're seeing right now is that Joe Biden has no chance in Texas. A lot of people are saying that Donald Trump was going to lose Texas in 2020, and that was just never going to happen. Yes, he did very badly even in 2016 compared to the solid margin that Romney saw in 2012. And so even though Trump did poorly in 2020, 2024, there just hasn't been enough time for Democrats to seriously target this state as being winnable. Now, Democrats have been working on trying to flip Texas for the last 2 decades. They've been pretty much unsuccessful up until this point. I do think that within the next 2 decades, Democrats will have a real shot at flipping Texas in a presidential or even gubernatorial election, but as of this moment in time, the Republican bias in the Lone Star State is enough itself to give Trump the victory. So this gives Donald Trump here 182 electoral votes. We're going to move up to the Midwest, where we have Minnesota, a state that Joe Biden carried by 7 points in 2020. Now, we don't actually have polling here. We did not have a Senate or governor, or we did have a gubernatorial race, but not a Senate race, and the governor election really wasn't that competitive between Tim Walz and Scott Jensen. We saw the Democratic incumbent getting reelected by a double-digit margin. So Minnesota, we don't have polling data there, but it's very likely to be likely Biden once again. However, we do have numbers from Iowa, a state that Trump carried by 8 and 9% in the last two elections. Currently, Trump is up by 9.5%. We saw a surprisingly competitive race in 2022 with Chuck Grassley defeating his Democratic opponent, Michael Franken, by less than a solid margin. It was a pretty poor showing for the 8-time incumbent, but he was still able to win re-election, and Donald Trump, who has done very well in the state in the last two elections, is going to win it for a third time if he is renominated. The last time Democrats won Iowa was back in 2012 with Barack Obama. Ever since Trump's victory in 2016, Iowa has continued to shift to the right. However, there is some good news for Joe Biden. We are seeing very good numbers for him in Wisconsin. Here, Joe Biden leads by 2%, according to the average of the only 3 polls that we've gotten, and all of them show Biden ahead. Wisconsin is the closest out of the 3 Rust Belt states. It's by far the most conservative, and Joe Biden leading here, I think, is a good sign for his chances at re-election. We also saw that Mandela Barnes did pretty well against the incumbent Ron Johnson in the Senate election here, and of course Democrats were able to win the governor election with Tim Walz, or not Tim Walz, but with the Democratic governor here winning re-election, and the Republican, which I believe was Tim Michaels, he did lose. So Democrats did very good, or the Democrat was Tony Evers, who was governor that won re-election, but Democrats had a pretty good showing in 2022, and I think that in 2024, Joe Biden has a serious chance at winning the state again. Now, Wisconsin was one of the 3 states that helped Trump win the election in 2016. As it flipped, with Trump winning the state by less than 1%. In 2012, it voted for Obama by 7. Moving on to Michigan, we have a Biden lead here of 0.5%. Biden leads in 2 out of the 6 polls. One of them shows an even race, and 3 of them have Trump ahead. Now, I do think that if Joe Biden's going to win Wisconsin, he's also probably going to win Michigan and even Pennsylvania. These 2 states are considerably more liberal than Wisconsin, and so I think that it's pretty surprising that Michigan is currently only ahead for Biden by 0.5%, but really we don't have that many polls out, so we don't have a large enough of a sample size to really judge the numbers here. So Michigan, 15 electoral votes should also go to Joe Biden if Wisconsin does. Democrats had an even better showing in Wisconsin, or in Michigan, than in Wisconsin, with Gretchen Whitmer easily winning her re-election as governor. Moving on to Ohio, Trump leads by 13.5%, another Trump state from the last 2 elections. And before that, it, of course, voted for Obama in 2012, Obama by 3, and then 2016, Trump by 8.1. And in 2020, people thought Joe Biden would do better, but Trump basically won by the exact same margin. Just like Iowa, Ohio is not looking back. It is shifting more and more to the right. Democrats should not focus any of their time or money onto these 2 states in future elections. They're basically lost for Democrats at this point. For a long time, Ohio was the bellwether state. It voted for whoever the country voted for, but that is no longer the case. It's going to vote Republican for the foreseeable future. In Pennsylvania, we have Democrats up by 0.9%. Joe Biden does lead in a handful of polls here. Now, the polls do suggest a very, very close race here in the Keystone State, just like we saw in 2020. I think the Rust Belt is going to be a major area of concentration once again, just like it was last time. I think that it could end up deciding the presidential election. It also could be states like Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, which are also closer than ever before. Moving up north here to New Hampshire, we're seeing Joe Biden up by a 3.4% margin, leading in every single poll. Maggie Hassan, the Democratic incumbent senator, easily won her re-election in 2022, defeating Don Bolduc. It wasn't a close race at all. Democrats did very well here. However, on the gubernatorial level, Kristen Sununu the Republican incumbent was able to win. But governor elections and Senate elections are really very, very different. These federal elections tend to favor Democrats significantly more, at least in the state of New Hampshire, which is going to be lean Democratic on our map. And surprisingly, we do actually have some numbers from Maine. Emerson College has Joe Biden up by 11%. This is probably a poll done with the governor poll. Janet Mills was able to win re-election as governor there in 2022. So a lot of really good showings for Democrats in 2022, and I think it will translate to 2024 because honestly, the Republican Party has had a messaging issue for quite a long time, and if they nominate Donald Trump, that issue is not going to be resolved. Moving down to the southeast, we don't have numbers in Virginia, but it's likely to be a likely Biden state again. Yes, Glenn Youngkin did win the governorship in 2021, but that honestly was just a fluke. I think Republicans always have a chance in Virginia, but in a presidential election like this, it's really not going to go to Donald Trump. Joe Biden was able to carry Virginia by 10 points. The state is continuing to shift to the left, but of course, it does sometimes vote for Republicans. Terry McAuliffe wasn't a great candidate, didn't run a great campaign, and Glenn Youngkin, I think, even though some of his messaging wasn't the best, I think he did do a much better job at winning voters over. In North Carolina, we're seeing a 5.2% lead for Donald Trump. This was a state that he did pretty poorly in 2020, only carrying it by 1.3%. But what's surprising was that North Carolina actually voted to the right of Georgia, which has traditionally been seen as the more conservative of the two. But seeing that Joe Biden couldn't win it in 2020, it's unlikely that he's going to carry it in 2024. I think if Joe Biden does win his re-election, he is not going to do better than he did last time. I think we're going to see something like what we saw with Obama, winning his first race with 365 electoral votes and his second with just 332. I don't think that Joe Biden is going to win more states than he did in the first election, and I think that his age has a lot to do with that. In the state of Georgia, we're currently seeing a lead of 4 points for Donald Trump, leading in an overwhelming majority of the polls, but Georgia is going to be a key race to watch. Of course, Joe Biden flipped it for the first time as a Democrat since 1992. The last Democrat to win Georgia was Bill Clinton 30 years ago. So Georgia is going to be, I believe, a lean state for Republicans here, so it's actually going to be red. This is going to give Trump 237 electoral votes, and of course, he's also going to win Florida. I think after seeing what we saw in 2020 with Trump winning Florida by 3 points, and then Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio winning their governor and Senate races by solid margins, we're not going to see Joe Biden flip Florida. In 2016, it was close. In 2012, it went to Obama. Many people thought Biden could win Florida. In 2020, he did even worse than Hillary Clinton in the end. So Florida is going to remain a Republican state for the foreseeable future as well. I think we're going to see similar trends to what we saw in Iowa and Ohio. Florida is shifting to the right, and we see this with the 1.4% lead that Trump has. Polls here have tended to significantly favor Biden, and I think that it's going to happen again. But Florida, 30 electoral votes going to go to Donald Trump. And so this right here is the map. When we also have the 2nd districts of Maine and Nebraska, which are relatively competitive, but the 2nd district of Maine for the last 2 races has pretty comfortably voted for Donald Trump, so that's going to make it likely Republican. But the 2nd district of Nebraska is really interesting. Joe Biden did win it by 6.6%, but due to redistricting in 2024, the district is going to be slightly different. It's going to favor Republicans a little bit more, and if Joe Biden can't win it, if this was a map that we're looking at, which is very, very possible, he might not win the election because with 269, the election goes to the House and Trump would win that, as he does have support from a majority of state delegations. It's not by voting members, it's by the number of states. And so when looking at this map right now, I think that Joe Biden needs to focus his attention on, of course, retaining the Rust Belt, but also on winning some of the Sun Belt states that he won. He might not win Georgia, might not win Arizona, and that's okay for Joe Biden, but as long as he can hold on to Nevada, he can still get reelected. Well, for Donald Trump, he has a pretty high hill to climb because he did lose a lot of states in 2020, especially in the Rust Belt and in the Sun Belt, and he's going to have to win most of them back if he wants to win the presidency once again. And so that will be it for this video. This is the 2024 presidential election map based on the latest polling between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. 269 electoral votes for the incumbent, 268 for the former president. Really a very interesting map to look at. Thank you guys so much for watching again. I will see you guys in the next video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Like this video down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below who you think will be the nominees in 2024 and which party do you think will win the presidency in just a little bit over a year. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys next week.